The stagecoach lurched to a halt outside the dusty general store in Unionville, Nevada, and Victoria Fairmont pressed her gloved hand against the window, peering through the grime at the small frontier town that would become her new home in the late summer of 1876. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drumbeat of hope and terror mingling together, as she clutched the worn leather satchel containing everything she owned in this world. 3 weeks of rattling across the vast American landscape from Philadelphia had given her plenty of time to rehearse what she would say to Daniel Easton, the rancher who had answered her advertisement for marriage. But now that the moment had arrived, every carefully prepared word fled from her mind like frightened birds. The driver opened the door and offered his weathered hand to help her down. Victoria stepped onto the wooden boardwalk, her navy traveling dress coated with a fine layer of dust, despite her best efforts to remain presentable. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, so different from the humid eastern summers she had known all her life. Everything about this place felt foreign and raw, from the distant purple mountains rising against the cloudless sky to the rough planked buildings lining the single main street. A saloon stood across the way, its doors swinging as a cowhand stumbled out into the bright light. Further down, she could see a church steeple which gave her some small comfort. Miss Fairmont. A deep voice behind her made Victoria spin around, and she found herself looking up into a pair of warm brown eyes set in a sun-bronzed face. The man who had spoken stood a head taller than her, with broad shoulders straining against a clean cotton shirt. He held his hat respectfully in his hands, revealing dark hair that fell across his forehead. Despite the nervousness twisting in her stomach, Victoria felt an immediate sense of relief. Daniel Easton looked kind, and in her experience, kindness was a rare and precious quality. "Mr. Easton," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, madam, but please call me Daniel. I hope your journey was not too difficult." He had an earnest quality about him, a directness in his gaze that suggested he meant every word he spoke. When he smiled, fine lines appeared at the corners of his eyes, telling of years spent squinting into the sun. "It was long, but I am here now." Victoria tried to smile back, aware of how she must look after weeks of travel. She had been beautiful once, or so people had told her. Now at 23, after all she had endured, she felt ancient and weathered, though the mirror suggested otherwise. Her auburn hair still shone, even beneath the dust, and her green eyes remained clear. But inside, where it mattered, she carried scars that no one could see. Daniel picked up her trunk as though it weighed nothing and gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. "My ranch is about 5 miles from town. It's not much, but it's honest land. We run cattle mostly. I have 3 hands who help with the work. Good men, respectful. You will be safe there." The word safe settled over Victoria like a blanket. Safe was all she had wanted for so long. Safe and somewhere to belong. She climbed onto the wagon seat, arranging her skirts, and Daniel settled beside her, taking up the reins. As the horses started forward, she stole glances at him from the corner of her eye. His hands on the reins were work roughened but gentle, and he kept a respectful distance between them on the bench. "I want you to know," Daniel said after they had left the town behind, "that I understand this is not conventional. You do not know me, and I do not know you. But I promise I will do my best to be a good husband to you. I will work hard to provide for you and treat you with respect. I am hoping we can build something real together, not just an arrangement of convenience." Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them back fiercely. "I will do my best to be a good wife to you," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I can cook and clean, and so I will work hard. I promise you that." "I am sure you will," Daniel's voice held warmth. "But that is not why I wanted a wife. I wanted a partner, someone to share life with. The work will get done either way, but coming home to an empty house, year after year, gets mighty lonesome." They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Victoria watched the landscape unfold around them. The desert scrubland stretched in every direction, dotted with sage and occasional Joshua trees. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding onto snow despite the summer heat in the valley. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way, so different from the green hills of Pennsylvania she had left behind. When they crested a small rise, Daniel pointed ahead. "There, that is home." Victoria followed his gesture and saw a ranch house nestled in a shallow valley where a creek cut through the land. The house itself was modest but well built, constructed of wood with a wide porch across the front. A barn stood nearby, along with several other outbuildings. Cottonwood trees grew along the creek, their leaves shimmering silver-green in the breeze. Cattle dotted the surrounding grassland, and she could see riders in the distance, small figures against the vast landscape. "It is lovely," she said, and meant it. There was something honest about this place, something real. It made the life she had left behind seem even more like a gilded cage, beautiful on the outside but suffocating within. As they pulled up to the house, a woman emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She was older, perhaps 60, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, but her face softened when she saw Victoria. "This is Martha Carlson," Daniel explained as he helped Victoria down from the wagon. "She was my mother's closest friend. She has been helping me get the house ready for your arrival." "Welcome, dear." Martha came down the steps and took Victoria's hands in her own work-worn ones. "You must be exhausted. Come inside and I will make you some tea. Daniel, bring her things in and then make yourself scarce for a bit." Let the poor girl catch her breath. Victoria found herself shepherded into the house, which was dim and cool after the bright heat outside. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Everything was clean and orderly, if sparse. Martha bustled about, setting a kettle on the stove and pulling out cups. "I have prepared the bedroom for you," Martha said, not unkindly. "Daniel has been sleeping in the spare room these past weeks, giving you space. He is a good man, that one. Lost his parents 5 years back to fever, both within a week of each other. Nearly broke him, but he kept the ranch going. Works harder than any 3 men I have known." Victoria listened, grateful for this information. She watched through the window as Daniel carried her trunk into the house, then, true to Martha's word, climbed back onto the wagon and headed toward the barn. "He will give you time," Martha continued, pouring hot water over tea leaves. "He knows this is an adjustment. But I will tell you something, girl. That man out there has a heart as big as this territory. He will treat you right if you let him." "I want to be a good wife to him," Victoria said softly. "Truly I do. Then you will be." Martha set a cup before her. "Now drink this, and then I will show you to your room. You can rest before dinner. Daniel will not expect anything of you today." But rest proved elusive. After Martha left, Victoria unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 other dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her hairbrush and mirror on the small dresser. The room was simple but comfortable, with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, and tried to calm the anxiety rising in her chest. She had to tell him. It would not be fair to let Daniel believe she could give him children when she knew the truth. The doctor in Philadelphia had been clear after the fever that had nearly killed her 2 years ago. The illness had left her barren. She would never carry a child. At the time, consumed with grief over other losses, it had seemed like just one more cruelty. But now, faced with this new beginning, the weight of that reality pressed down on her. Daniel deserved to know. He deserved the choice of whether to send her back or proceed with the marriage. The thought of returning to Philadelphia, to the pitying looks and the closed doors, made her feel sick. But deceiving this kind man would be worse. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Victoria heard the sound of boots on the porch. A gentle knock came at the door. "Victoria." "Martha left some stew warming on the stove. Would you like to have dinner?" She opened the door to find Daniel standing there, hat in hand again, his hair damp as though he had just washed up. He had changed into a clean shirt, and she could smell soap and leather and something else, something earthy and masculine that made her pulse quicken despite her anxiety. "Yes, thank you." She followed him to the kitchen area, where he ladled stew into bowls and set out fresh bread. They sat across from each other at the small table, and for a few minutes the only sound was spoons against bowls. "The ranch is beautiful," Victoria offered, breaking the silence. "You have done well here." "My father started it, but it has grown these past few years. Cattle prices have been good. We drive a herd to the railhead every fall." Daniel paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I want you to feel at home here, Victoria. I know you gave up everything to come here, and I do not take that lightly. If there is anything you need, anything that would make you more comfortable, you only have to say so." This was her moment. Victoria set down her spoon, her hands trembling slightly. "Daniel, there is something I need to tell you, something important. I should have written it in my letters, but I was afraid. I was afraid you would not want me if you knew." Daniel's expression grew serious but not unkind. "Go on." Victoria took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his eyes. 2 years ago, I fell ill with a terrible fever. It nearly killed me. I was sick for months. When I finally recovered, the doctor told me that the fever had damaged something inside me. He said I would never be able to have children. The words hung in the air between them, heavy as stones. Victoria felt tears burning in her eyes but refused to let them fall. "I understand if you want to send me back. I know most men want sons to pass their land to. I should have told you before I came, but I was desperate. My circumstances in Philadelphia had become impossible. My parents had died, and I had nowhere to go. But it was wrong of me to deceive you, and I am sorry." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable in the lamplight. Victoria felt her heart sinking with each passing second. Of course he would send her back. What man would want a barren wife? Then Daniel reached across the table and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, his grip gentle but firm. "Then we will love each other more," he said simply. Victoria stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "If we cannot have children, then we will pour all that love we would have given them into loving each other instead." Daniel's brown eyes were steady, honest. "Victoria, I will not lie and say I never thought about having sons or daughters. But what I have wanted most, what drove me to seek a wife, was partnership, companionship, someone to share this life with. Children would have been a blessing, but they are not the foundation of what I am hoping to build here." "You truly mean that?" Victoria's voice broke despite her best efforts. "I truly mean that." Daniel squeezed her hand. "I will not send you back, not unless you want to go, and I hope you do not want to go." The tears came then, sliding down Victoria's cheeks, and she made no effort to stop them. Relief flooded through her, so intense it left her shaking. "I do not want to go. I want to stay. I want to be your wife." "Then that is settled." Daniel smiled, and the warmth in his expression made Victoria feel something she had not felt in years. Hope. They finished their dinner with lighter conversation, and Daniel told her about the ranch, about the 3 hands who worked for him, about the plans he had for expanding the herd. Victoria found herself relaxing, even laughing at his stories about ornery cattle and stubborn horses. When the meal was done, Daniel insisted on washing the dishes while Victoria dried and put them away, a simple domestic task that felt surprisingly intimate. "I meant what I told Martha," Daniel said as they worked. "I will give you time. We can wait to have the wedding ceremony performed until you are ready, until you feel comfortable. I have made up the spare room for myself, and you can keep the main bedroom. There is no rush for anything." "You are very kind," Victoria said softly. "Kinder than I deserve. You deserve kindness." Daniel's voice was firm. "Whatever happened in Philadelphia, whatever made you feel you had to flee across the country to find safety, you deserve to be treated with respect and care. I hope I can give you that." That night, lying in the comfortable bed in her new room, Victoria stared at the ceiling and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods. Somewhere, an owl called. She thought about Daniel's words, about the gentle way he had held her hand, about the promise of love in his voice when he said they would love each other more. For the first time in 2 years, she let herself believe that perhaps life could still hold something good. The next morning, Victoria woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. She dressed quickly, braiding her hair and pinning it up, then ventured into the kitchen to find Daniel at the stove. "I hope I did not wake you," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I am used to rising early for the ranch work." "Not at all. Let me finish that. You should go about your work." Victoria moved to take over the cooking, and Daniel surrendered the spatula with obvious relief. "I will introduce you to the hands at breakfast," he said. "They eat here in the mornings. I hope that is all right. It has been our custom." "Of course." Victoria set about making biscuits to go with the bacon and eggs, falling into the familiar rhythm of cooking. It felt good to be useful, to have a purpose. When the 3 ranch hands arrived, stomping the dust from their boots before entering, Victoria observed them carefully. The oldest was a weathered man named Pete, probably in his 50s, with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor. The other 2 were younger brothers named Tom and Jim Sawyer, probably in their late 20s, both sunburned and shy around her. "Miss Fairmont," Pete said, nodding respectfully. "Welcome to the ranch. We are pleased to have you here. Thank you. Please call me Victoria." "Yes, madam." Pete sat at the table, followed by the brothers, and they all ate with the focused attention of men who did hard physical labor. The conversation was minimal but comfortable, mostly about the work that needed doing that day. A fence needed mending in the north pasture. Several head of cattle had wandered toward the creek and needed to be moved. The usual business of a working ranch. After the men left, Daniel lingered. "I should be back by midday. Will you be all right here alone?" "Of course. I have plenty to keep me busy." Victoria surveyed the kitchen, already mentally cataloging what needed to be done. "This is what I am here for." Daniel hesitated, then said, "You are here to be my partner, not my servant. Please do not feel you have to work yourself to exhaustion trying to prove your worth." His words touched something deep inside her, but Victoria just smiled. "I will be fine. Go on, your cattle are waiting." Alone in the house, Victoria set about making it truly clean. She swept and scrubbed, washed windows, and beat rugs. She found the root cellar and took stock of the supplies, making mental notes of what they would need from town. The work was satisfying, tangible proof that she belonged here, that she was contributing something real. She was hanging sheets on the clothesline behind the house when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Shading her eyes against the sun, Victoria saw a wagon pulling up to the house. Martha Carlson sat on the bench, and beside her was a younger woman, perhaps Victoria's age, with blonde hair and a cheerful face. "Good morning," Martha called, climbing down from the wagon. "I brought my niece, Sarah, to meet you. I thought you might enjoy some female company while Daniel is out working." Sarah hopped down lightly and came forward with a warm smile. "Hello. I am so glad to meet you. We do not get many new people in Unionville, especially not interesting ones." Victoria found herself smiling back, charmed by Sarah's open friendliness. "I am happy to meet you too. Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." The three women settled around the kitchen table, and Victoria learned that Sarah worked as a schoolteacher in Unionville, teaching the dozen or so children whose families lived in and around the town. She was unmarried but cheerfully unconcerned about it. "There are not many prospects here," Sarah said with a laugh. "Most of the unmarried men are cowboys passing through, and I am not interested in that kind of uncertainty. I am happy with my teaching." "Sarah is being modest," Martha interjected. "Every eligible man in 3 counties has tried to court her at one point or another. She just has high standards." "I learned from watching you," Sarah teased her aunt. "You waited until you found the right man, and you had 30 good years together before he passed." Martha's expression softened. "That I did, and I do not regret a single day of waiting." The women talked for over an hour, and Victoria felt herself relaxing in their company. Sarah was funny and bright, full of stories about her students and the various characters who lived in and around Unionville. Martha shared wisdom about surviving in the harsh Nevada climate, about which gardens would grow in the desert soil and which were hopeless, about how to prepare for the brutal winters and the scorching summers. "Daniel is a good man," Martha said as she prepared to leave. "One of the best I have known. You are fortunate to have found each other." After they left, Victoria returned to her tasks with a lighter heart. She had been so afraid that she would be isolated here, trapped in loneliness. But already she was finding the beginnings of friendship, the foundations of community. Daniel returned at midday as promised, and they ate lunch together. He seemed pleased to find the house spotless, but even more pleased when Victoria told him about Martha and Sarah's visit. "I am glad you are making friends," he said. "Sarah is wonderful. Half the town is in love with her, but she is particular about who she gives her time to. If she likes you, it says something good." That afternoon, Daniel asked if Victoria wanted to see more of the ranch. She agreed eagerly, and he saddled 2 horses, a gentle mare for her and his own gelding. They rode out across the land, Daniel pointing out the boundaries of his property, the best grazing areas, the challenges posed by the terrain. Victoria had learned to ride as a girl, but it had been years and she was rusty. Daniel was patient, offering guidance without making her feel incompetent. As they rode, she found herself watching him, noticing the easy way he sat his horse, the genuine affection in his voice when he talked about the land and the animals. They stopped near the creek, dismounting to let the horses drink. The cottonwoods provided welcome shade, and the sound of running water was soothing. Daniel pulled off his hat and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "I want to ask you something," he said, not looking at her. "About what you said last night. About your circumstances in Philadelphia being impossible. You do not have to answer if you do not want to. But if something happened, if someone hurt you, I want to know. Not out of curiosity, but because if anyone comes looking for you, I want to be prepared." Victoria sat on a smooth rock near the water's edge, trailing her fingers in the cool creek. "No one will come looking for me. I promise you that. My parents died within months of each other 3 years ago. My father had debts I did not know about. Everything was sold to pay them. I had a small inheritance from my mother's side of the family, enough to live on modestly, but I needed somewhere to live. She paused, the memories bitter. I had a cousin who offered to take me in. Marcus. He seemed kind at first, but after a few months he began to suggest that I should marry him. He said it made sense, kept the family together, the money together. When I refused, he became angry. He controlled my inheritance, and he threatened to cut me off entirely if I did not agree. When I continued to refuse, he made good on his threat. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting her continue. I tried to find work, but I was sick with the fever by then. I nearly died. A charity hospital took me in. After I recovered, I had nothing. No money, no home, no prospects. Marcus spread rumors about me, said I was unstable, that the fever had affected my mind. No one would hire me. I was facing the choice of the poorhouse or worse. Victoria met Daniel's eyes. That is when I saw the advertisement for mail-order brides going west. It seemed like the only chance I had for any kind of decent life. "I am sorry," Daniel said quietly. "I am sorry you went through that, but I am grateful you answered my letter, grateful you took the chance on coming here." "I am grateful you took a chance on me," Victoria smiled sadly. "Especially after I told you about not being able to have children. Most men would have sent me back on the next stage." Daniel moved to sit beside her on the rock, close but not touching. "I have been thinking about what you said, about children. And I realize I never really talked about wanting them in my letters, did I?" "No, you did not. There is a reason for that." Daniel picked up a pebble and tossed it into the creek. "When I was 20, I was engaged to a girl named Elizabeth. We had known each other since childhood. Everyone expected us to marry. But Elizabeth was in love with someone else, a man her parents disapproved of because he was poor. She was honest with me about it, told me the truth. We called off the engagement, and she ran away with the man she loved." He smiled, but there was old hurt in his eyes. "Everyone said I should be angry, but I was not. Mostly, I felt relieved. I had been going through the motions because it was expected, not because I truly loved her. After that, I realized I did not want a marriage of expectations and obligations. I wanted something real. Something based on honest feelings, not on what society says a marriage should be." "That is a mature way to look at it," Victoria said softly. "I had a lot of time to think while I was alone on this ranch." Daniel turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "When you answered my advertisement, when I read your letters, I felt something I had not felt before. A real connection. You wrote about wanting partnership and honesty, about wanting to build something meaningful. That resonated with me more than any talk of children or family legacy ever could." "I felt that too," Victoria admitted. "Your letters were different from the others I received. You talked about the work and the land, yes, but also about ideas. About books you had read and thoughts you had about life. You treated me like an equal, someone whose opinions mattered." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the creek bubble over stones. Then Daniel stood and offered his hand to help Victoria up. "We should head back before it gets dark, but I want you to know something, Victoria. I am committed to this, to us, to building a life together. However long it takes for you to feel comfortable, I am willing to wait. But I want you to know my intentions are honorable and serious." Victoria took his hand, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. "I appreciate that more than you know." They rode back to the ranch as the sun began its descent, painting the landscape in long shadows and golden light. Victoria found herself watching Daniel again, the straight line of his back, the confident way he moved with the horse. Something was growing inside her, something warm and fragile and frightening. She recognized it, though she had not felt it in so long. Hope, and something more. the first stirrings of genuine affection. That evening, they worked together to prepare dinner, moving around the kitchen with increasing ease. The conversation flowed naturally, ranging from practical matters about the ranch to more personal topics. Daniel told her about growing up in Nevada, about the challenges of frontier life but also its freedoms. Victoria shared memories of her childhood in Philadelphia, the good times before everything fell apart. "Would you like to be married soon?" Daniel asked as they washed dishes. "I mean, have the ceremony. We can wait if you want, but I thought perhaps having that official commitment might help you feel more secure here." Victoria considered. The truth was, she already felt more secure than she had in years. Daniel had proven himself to be kind and patient, honest and hardworking. Waiting served no real purpose except her own fear, and she was tired of letting fear dictate her choices. "I would like that," she said. "Whenever you think is appropriate. How about Sunday?" "I can speak to the minister tomorrow when I go into town for supplies. He can perform the ceremony after the regular service if that suits you." Sunday would be perfect. Daniel smiled, that warm, genuine smile that made his whole face light up. "Then Sunday it is. We will be properly married." That night, Victoria lay in bed and tried to calm her racing thoughts. In just a few days, she would be Daniel's wife in truth, not just in agreement. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. What if she could not be what he needed? What if her past had damaged her too much to be a good partner? But then she remembered his words by the creek, his steady presence, his gentleness. Daniel had already accepted the hardest truth about her and had not flinched. Surely that meant something. Surely that was the foundation on which something real could be built. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. Martha and Sarah returned, bringing fabric for a simple wedding dress. Sarah proved to be an excellent seamstress, and together the three women transformed the cloth into a beautiful gown, cream-colored with lace at the collar and cuffs. It was more than Victoria had expected, more than she felt she deserved, but their enthusiasm was infectious. "Every bride deserves something special," Martha said firmly when Victoria protested. "Even for a simple ceremony." Daniel went into town and returned with news that the minister would indeed perform the ceremony Sunday afternoon. He also brought Victoria a gift, wrapped in brown paper. When she opened it, she found a beautiful shawl, woven in shades of blue and green. "I saw it in the general store and thought of your eyes," Daniel said, looking embarrassed but pleased. "I wanted you to have something nice for the wedding." Victoria held the shawl to her chest, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "It is beautiful, thank you." On Saturday evening, Martha and Sarah stayed for dinner, and the conversation was lively and warm. Pete, Tom, and Jim also joined them, and Pete produced a fiddle from somewhere and played cheerful tunes that had Sarah laughing and trying to get everyone to dance in the small living space. "To the bride and groom," Pete said, raising his glass of cider in a toast. "May you have many happy years together." "Many happy years," everyone echoed, and Victoria felt tears prick her eyes again. These people, virtual strangers just days ago, were welcoming her into their community with open arms. It was more than she had dared hope for. Sunday dawned clear and bright, with a cool breeze tempering the heat. Victoria dressed carefully in her new gown, and Sarah helped arrange her hair in an elaborate style, weaving in small wildflowers they had picked the day before. When Victoria looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy. She looked hopeful. The church in Unionville was small and simple, with wooden pews and a plain altar, but it was full of people. Apparently word had spread that Daniel Easton was getting married, and the whole town had turned out to see his bride. Victoria felt a moment of panic as she stood in the doorway, Daniel beside her in a clean suit she had not seen before. So many eyes on her, so much attention. But then Daniel took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Ready?" he whispered, and she nodded. They walked down the aisle together, no one to give her away because she belonged to herself. The minister, a gray-haired man with a kind face, smiled at them both. The ceremony was simple and brief. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to honor and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When Daniel slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Victoria felt something shift inside her, a sense of rightness settling into place. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said. "You may kiss the bride." Daniel leaned down, his eyes searching hers for permission. Victoria rose on her toes to meet him halfway, and their lips touched in a brief, gentle kiss that sent warmth cascading through her entire body. When they pulled back, both were smiling. The congregation erupted in applause, and suddenly everyone was pressing forward to offer congratulations. Victoria was hugged by women she had never met, her hand shaken by ranchers and shopkeepers and miners. Sarah was crying happy tears, and Martha was beaming with pride. Afterward, there was a celebration at the church hall. Someone had brought a cake, others contributed food, and Pete's fiddle came out again for dancing. Daniel proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, and he swept Victoria around the floor until she was breathless and laughing. "Happy?" he asked, pulling her close as a slower tune began. "Very happy," Victoria replied, and realized she meant it with her whole heart. As the afternoon stretched into evening, they finally said their goodbyes and headed back to the ranch. The hands had tactfully made themselves scarce, bunking down in the barn for the night to give the newlyweds privacy. At the ranch house, Daniel helped Victoria down from the wagon, and they stood for a moment in the gathering dusk, neither quite sure how to proceed. They were married now, truly married, and the implications hung in the air between them. "Victoria," Daniel said softly, "I meant what I said about taking time. Just because we are married does not mean anything has to happen tonight. We can take this at whatever pace you are comfortable with." Victoria looked at this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and patience. This man who had accepted her despite her inability to give him children. This man who had, in just over a week, made her feel safer and more valued than she had felt in years. "I know you would wait," she said, "but I do not want you to. I want this marriage to be real in every way. I want to try." Daniel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "Are you certain?" "I am certain." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Victoria felt herself responding, her arms coming up to circle his neck. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Daniel swept her up into his arms, making her gasp and laugh, and carried her over the threshold into their home. He set her down gently in the bedroom, and for a moment, they just looked at each other, both nervous and excited. "I should warn you," Daniel said with a small smile. "I have not done this very many times. I might not be very good at it." "Then we will learn together," Victoria replied, and reached up to begin unbuttoning his shirt. What followed was tender and gentle, both of them fumbling and uncertain at times, but finding their way together. Daniel was patient and attentive, constantly checking to make sure Victoria was comfortable, that he was not hurting her. And Victoria, for her part, found that despite all her fears, despite the trauma she had endured, she could surrender to this intimacy, could find pleasure and connection in it. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, the windows open to let in the cool night air. Daniel traced lazy patterns on Victoria's shoulder, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" for being patient, for being kind, for giving me this chance." Daniel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You do not need to thank me for treating you the way you deserve to be treated, but you are welcome, all the same." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and Victoria slept more peacefully than she had in years. The following weeks settled into a rhythm. Victoria took over the running of the household completely, but she did not see it as a burden. She enjoyed the work, the sense of purpose it gave her. She kept the house clean, prepared meals for the hands, tended a small vegetable garden that Martha had helped her start. In the afternoons, when the worst heat of the day had passed, she would ride out to wherever Daniel was working, bringing water and spending time with him. Their marriage deepened and strengthened. They learned each other's rhythms and preferences, learned how to communicate and compromise. Daniel taught Victoria more about the ranch, about cattle and horses, about reading the weather and the land. Victoria introduced more order and comfort to Daniel's life, but also softness and laughter. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing, and the physical intimacy between them grew more natural and passionate. One evening, about a month after their wedding, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Victoria said, "I am happy here. Happier than I ever thought I could be." Daniel took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "I am happy too. You have made this house a home, made my life richer in every way." "I was so afraid when I came here," Victoria admitted. "Afraid you would reject me when you knew the truth. Afraid I could not be what you needed. But you have never made me feel lacking. You have never made me feel less than whole. Because you are not less than whole." Daniel turned to face her fully. "Victoria, I mean what I said on our first night. If we cannot have children, we will pour all that love into each other. You are enough. You will always be enough." Victoria felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were good tears, healing tears. "I love you," she said, the words coming naturally. "I did not plan to fall in love so quickly, but I have. I love you, Daniel. I love you too." Daniel pulled her close, and they sat together as the stars began to appear overhead, countless points of light in the vast Nevada sky. Summer turned to fall, and the ranch work intensified as they prepared to drive the cattle to market. Daniel would be gone for nearly 2 weeks with the herd, and Victoria was not looking forward to the separation. But she helped with the preparations, packing supplies and making sure everything was in order. The night before Daniel was set to leave, they lay in bed talking quietly. "I will miss you," Victoria said, tracing the line of his jaw with her finger. "I have grown accustomed to having you near." "I will miss you too, but Pete will be here and Tom. Jim is coming on the drive with me. You will be safe." Daniel caught her hand and kissed her palm. "When I get back, we should talk about going to San Francisco for a few days. Take a trip, see the city. Would you like that? I would love that." They made love that night with a particular intensity, knowing they would be parted for a while, and afterward Victoria clung to him more tightly than usual. The morning he left was harder than she had expected. She stood on the porch and watched the dust cloud raised by the cattle herd until it disappeared over the horizon. Daniel and Jim just small figures on horseback among the chaos. Then she went back inside and threw herself into work, determined not to mope. The days passed slowly. Victoria kept busy with the usual tasks, and Sarah visited several times to keep her company. Pete was a quiet but reassuring presence, checking in regularly to make sure everything was all right. But the house felt empty without Daniel, the bed too large and too cold at night. On the 10th day, Victoria woke feeling ill. Her stomach was upset, and she could barely choke down her morning coffee. She attributed it to anxiety about Daniel's absence and tried to ignore it, but the nausea persisted throughout the day. By the 11th day, She was genuinely worried. The nausea had not abated, and she felt exhausted despite sleeping well. When Martha stopped by to check on her and found Victoria pale and shaky, the older woman took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "How long have you been feeling sick, dear?" "2 days now." "I think I might have eaten something bad." Martha's smile widened. "Or it might be something else entirely. Tell me, when was your last monthly course?" Victoria opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. She tried to remember, counting back the weeks. Her cycles had been irregular since her illness, so she had not been paying close attention, but now that Martha mentioned it, she realized it had been quite some time. But that was impossible. The doctor had been clear. "It has been a while," she admitted. "But Martha, I cannot be with child." "The doctor said the fever left me barren." "Doctors are not infallible." Martha put a hand on Victoria's forehead, checking for fever. "How do you feel aside from the nausea? Any tenderness in your breasts? Any unusual fatigue?" Victoria thought about it and realized both were true. Her breasts had been sore for days, and she had been falling asleep unusually early each evening. But she was afraid to hope, afraid to believe. "It could just be nothing," she said weakly. "It could be," Martha agreed, "but it could also be a baby. I have seen this often enough to recognize the signs. Give it another week or two. If the symptoms continue and your course still does not come, we will know for certain." After Martha left, Victoria sat at the kitchen table, her hands pressed to her flat stomach. Could it be possible? Could the doctor have been wrong? She was almost afraid to consider it, afraid of the crushing disappointment if it turned out to be false hope. Daniel returned 2 days later, tired and dusty but grinning. The drive had been successful, the cattle sold for good prices. He swept Victoria into his arms, kissing her soundly, then pulled back and frowned. "Are you all right? You look pale." "I have been feeling a bit ill," Victoria admitted. "Nothing serious, I am sure." But over the next week, the symptoms continued and intensified. Victoria found herself unable to stomach the smell of coffee, which had never bothered her before. Certain foods made her nauseated just thinking about them. She was exhausted all the time, falling asleep before the sun had fully set. Daniel was worried, insisting she see the doctor. The nearest doctor was in a town 20 miles away, and Daniel drove her there himself, pushing the horses faster than usual in his concern. Dr. Harrison was a middle-aged man with a brisk, efficient manner. He examined Victoria thoroughly, asked her a series of questions, then sat back with a slight smile. "Mrs. Easton, there is nothing wrong with you that will not resolve itself in about 7 or 8 months. Victoria felt the room spin. "What? You are with child?" "About 2 months along, I would estimate. Congratulations." "But that is impossible." Victoria's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "A doctor in Philadelphia told me I could not have children. He said the fever I had damaged me permanently." Dr. Harrison shrugged. Clearly, he was mistaken. "Or perhaps your body healed more than he thought possible. Either way, you are definitely pregnant. All the signs are there." Victoria turned to look at Daniel, who was staring at her with an expression of pure wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," the doctor confirmed. The ride back to the ranch was a blur. Victoria kept touching her stomach, unable to believe it. A baby. After everything, after all the grief and loss and fear, they were going to have a baby. "Are you happy?" she asked Daniel at one point, suddenly afraid. "I know you said you were fine without children, that we would love each other more. I do not want you to think I lied to you." Daniel pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road. He turned to Victoria and took both her hands in his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I am beyond happy. I am amazed. But Victoria, listen to me. Even if you had not gotten pregnant, even if we had lived our whole lives without children, I still would have been happy, because I have you. You are the greatest gift I could have asked for. This baby is a blessing I never expected, and I am grateful beyond words. But you are what matters most to me. You will always be what matters most." Victoria threw her arms around him and cried, great heaving sobs of relief and joy and love. Daniel held her, rocking her gently, his own tears dampening her hair. When they finally composed themselves and continued home, they were both grinning like fools, unable to stop smiling. At the ranch, they told Pete, Tom, and Jim, who whooped and hollered and shook Daniel's hand until Victoria thought his arm would fall off. Word spread quickly through Unionville. Martha and Sarah descended on the ranch with congratulations and advice, bringing baby clothes and blankets that Martha had saved from years ago. The community rallied around them, excited about the coming baby. As the weeks turned into months, Victoria's body changed. Her stomach grew round, and she felt the first flutters of movement that gradually became stronger kicks and rolls. Daniel was fascinated by every aspect of the pregnancy, constantly touching her belly and marveling at the life growing inside. They transformed the spare room into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and building a cradle from smooth pine. Victoria sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full to bursting with love for this child she had not yet met. Winter came to Nevada, cold and harsh, but the ranch house was warm and cozy. Victoria grew large and ungainly, and Daniel was endlessly patient, helping her with tasks that had become difficult, rubbing her aching back, and holding her when she cried from the overwhelming emotions that pregnancy brought. On a cold February night in 1877, Victoria woke to pain rippling through her abdomen. She knew immediately what it meant. Daniel rode through the darkness to fetch Martha and the doctor, and by the time they arrived, Victoria's labor was well underway. It was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Daniel stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement when she was certain she could not go on. Finally, as the sun was setting again, the baby was born. A lusty cry filled the room and the doctor held up a red, squalling infant. "It is a boy," he announced. "A healthy, strong boy." The doctor cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Victoria's arms. She looked down at the tiny face, the miniature hands waving in the air, and felt her heart expand to accommodate a love so vast she had not known such feeling was possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Daniel leaned over them both, his expression one of absolute awe. He reached out a tentative finger and the baby's hand instinctively grasped it, holding on with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Daniel said, his voice choked with emotion. "Victoria, you are perfect. You have given me everything." "We gave this to each other," Victoria corrected gently. "We built this together." They named him William after Daniel's father, William Daniel Easton. He had dark hair like Daniel and green eyes like Victoria, and from the very first, he was the center of their world. The early days of parenthood were exhausting and overwhelming. William was a good baby, but he still demanded constant attention. Victoria found herself operating on very little sleep, and Daniel helped as much as he could, taking the baby in the early mornings so Victoria could get a few extra hours of rest before the day began. Martha and Sarah were constant visitors, helping with chores and offering advice. The community continued to support them, bringing meals and hand-me-down baby items and endless good wishes. As William grew, passing from infancy into toddlerhood, the ranch prospered. Daniel expanded the herd, bought more land, hired another hand. The house became filled with the sounds of a child's laughter, of running feet and excited babbling. Victoria often thought back to that first day she had arrived in Unionville, terrified and desperate, carrying her shameful secret. She remembered the moment she had confessed to Daniel, certain he would send her away. And she remembered his response, those words that had changed everything. "Then we will love each other more." It had proven to be true in ways she never could have imagined. Even before William's unexpected arrival, she and Daniel had built something rare and precious, a marriage based on genuine love and partnership. The inability to have children, which had seemed like such a tragedy, had actually freed them to focus on their relationship, to build a foundation strong enough to weather anything. And then, when William did come, he was not the center of their world in a way that pushed them apart, but rather a beautiful addition to the love they had already created. On a warm spring evening when William was 2 years old, Victoria stood on the porch watching her son play in the yard, chasing a patient barn cat. Daniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come, about how different my life is from what I expected when I left Philadelphia. Better or worse, so much better." Victoria turned in his arms to face him. "I never knew life could be this good. I never knew I could be this happy." "I feel the same way." Daniel kissed her softly. "You took a chance on me, on this life, and I will spend every day trying to be worthy of that faith. You already are worthy. You proved that the very first night when you accepted me despite everything, when you chose love over expectation." They stood together, watching their son play, the Nevada sun setting behind the mountains in a blaze of orange and gold. The land stretched out around them, vast and challenging and beautiful. It was a hard life in many ways, but it was their life, built together from honesty and hope and love. 2 years later, Victoria gave birth to twins, a boy and girl they named James and Catherine. The house became even more chaotic, filled with the sounds of 3 young children, but also with more laughter and joy than Victoria had ever thought possible. Daniel proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching his children about the land and the animals, reading to them in the evenings and always making them feel loved and valued. Victoria thrived in motherhood, though it was exhausting and sometimes overwhelming. She had help, though. Sarah had married one of the miners from town, a good man named Robert, and their daughter was close in age to William. The two families spent a great deal of time together. As the years passed, the children grew. William showed an aptitude for ranching, following his father everywhere and learning the work. James was more bookish, preferring to read, which delighted Victoria. Catherine was fearless and adventurous, climbing trees and riding horses almost before she could walk properly. The ranch continued to prosper. Daniel's hard work and fair dealing had earned him respect throughout the territory. They added on to the house, built a bigger barn, and increased the herd size. Pete eventually retired, but stayed on the ranch in a small cabin Daniel built for him, becoming a beloved grandfather figure to the children. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Daniel took Victoria to San Francisco as he had once promised. They left the children with Martha and Sarah and spent a week exploring the city, eating in fine restaurants, attending the theater, and simply enjoying each other's company without the demands of children and ranch work. "You ever regret it?" Victoria asked one evening as they walked along the waterfront. "Taking a chance on a mail-order bride who could not give you children. You gave me 3 children," Daniel pointed out with a smile. "You know what I mean. What if I actually had been barren? Would you still be happy?" Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Victoria, I have been happy from the moment you agreed to stay. Yes, I love our children more than life itself, but my happiness has never been dependent on them. It has always been dependent on you, on the life we built together. I meant what I said all those years ago. If we had not had children, we would have loved each other more. As it is, we have children and we still love each other more. Every day I love you more." Victoria reached up to touch his face, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. "I love you too, more than I have words to express. You saved me, Daniel. You gave me a life when I had nothing." "We saved each other," he corrected. "I was alone on that ranch, going through the motions of living but not really alive. You brought warmth and light into my world. You made everything matter." They kissed there on the San Francisco waterfront, passers-by smiling at the obviously devoted couple, and Victoria felt the same flutter of happiness she had felt on their wedding day, only deeper now, richer from years of shared experience. The years continued to pass. William grew into a strong young man, working the ranch alongside his father. James surprised everyone by deciding to become a lawyer, leaving for college in California. Catherine met a neighboring rancher's son and fell in love, eventually marrying and starting her own family on the adjacent property. Daniel and Victoria grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces acquiring the lines and weathering of a life spent in the harsh but beautiful Nevada landscape. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared experience and mutual respect. They became grandparents multiple times over, their house once again filling with the sounds of children as grandchildren came to visit. Daniel taught them to ride and rope, just as he had taught his own children. Victoria baked cookies and told stories, passing on the wisdom she had gained over the years. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun set, Victoria said, "We should write our story down, for the grandchildren, so they know how it all began." "What would you tell them?" Daniel asked, his hand finding hers as it always did. "I would tell them about a desperate woman who traveled across the country seeking any kind of life that might be better than what she was leaving behind. About a kind man who looked past her flaws and saw her worth. About how honesty and vulnerability can create the strongest foundation. About how love is not just about the good times and the easy paths, but about choosing each other even when things are difficult." "I would tell them," Daniel added, "about how the unexpected blessings are often the sweetest. About how what we think we want is not always what we need. About how love multiplies rather than divides." They sat in companionable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to purple to deep blue. The ranch stretched out around them, this land they had worked and nurtured for decades. Inside the house, they could hear William and his wife getting the children ready for bed. Tomorrow, Catherine would bring her family for Sunday dinner. James would be home from California next month for a visit. Victoria thought about the young woman she had been, stepping off that stagecoach in Unionville all those years ago. Terrified and alone, carrying a secret she was certain would destroy her one chance at happiness. She thought about Daniel's response to her confession, those simple words that had changed everything. "Then we will love each other more." It had become their motto, their guiding principle. Through every challenge and hardship, through the years of drought and the years of plenty, through the raising of children and the building of a legacy, they had loved each other more, and it had been enough. It had been more than enough. It had been everything. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria smiled, that same smile that still made Daniel's heart skip a beat even after all these years. "I am thinking about how grateful I am for you, for this life." for every single moment of it. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they showed me what we were capable of together. They proved that love is not just a feeling, but a choice we make every day. Daniel brought her hand to his lips and kissed it softly. Here is to making that choice every day for as long as we both shall live. And beyond, Victoria added. I believe love like ours transcends even death. I believe we will find each other again in whatever comes next. Then I will look forward to it, but I am in no hurry. I am quite content right here, right now with you. They sat together as the night deepened, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and had built something beautiful and lasting. The ranch they had created would continue long after they were gone, passed down to their children and grandchildren. But more than the land or the cattle or the house, their true legacy was the love they had shared, the example they had set of what marriage could be when built on honesty, respect, and genuine affection. Inside the house, a child laughed. A door closed. Life continued in its beautiful, ordinary way. And on the porch, Daniel and Victoria held hands and watched the stars, grateful for every moment they had been given, for every challenge they had overcome, for every choice they had made that had led them to this perfect, imperfect life they had built together. It was not the life Victoria had imagined when she boarded that stagecoach in Philadelphia all those years ago. It was not the life Daniel had expected when he placed that advertisement seeking a mail-order bride. But it was the life they had created together, and it was more than either of them had dared to dream. As they finally stood to go inside, Victoria paused and looked back at the land stretching away into the darkness. "Thank you," she whispered to the universe, to fate, to whatever force had brought them together. Daniel put his arm around her shoulder, and together they walked into their home, into the warmth and light and love that filled every corner of it. The door closed behind them, but through the windows, the soft glow of lamplight spilled out into the Nevada night, a beacon of home and hope and happiness hard-won and deeply cherished. And that, Victoria thought as she settled into bed beside the man she loved more with each passing year, was the best story of all.